podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you can please do that before we get into the show, I would much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. I'm Majestic.
My brother, Justice Rajee.
All right. So we're going to try to pick up a conversation that we tried to have and realize that the forces of America, the technology at hand at the time, were not going to cooperate with getting something going. But in a very significant, I guess, ongoing effort of those who apparently decided they're going to spend their entire life trying to reverse the structural changes of the civil rights era at all costs. A very significant part of the Voting Rights Act was struck down. Was it Section 2? I want to say, if I remember correctly. I probably didn't. I will go back and I'm not going to go back and edit thing, but y'all know what I'm talking about. In Clay, Louisiana, where
Keep into the
folks,
podcast world.
Yes, sir. You know what I'm saying? Where, as I say, in the world of, if you want something to be true, you sure could find a way to rationalize it and make it true. Supreme Court ruled that part was against, basically, like unconstitutional or not in line with the Constitution, because it would acknowledge race in the determination of reasoning for the electoral maps. This is not a technical legal podcast. So I will leave the deep technical specifics to other people. The important thing of the moment is a significant, immediately, without the protections in place and with the ability to say, and as they say, with the wrestling, the K-fob or whatever, multiple Republican-held state houses immediately began remapping and running remapping campaigns. Louisiana actually stopped an active election with votes that had already been cast and said, yeah, we're going to move this to another election so we can redo the maps. First to attack current congressional seats and congressional maps. Soon to come will be, if there is an ability to do it, because some of these states have already done a masterful level of political gerrymandering, and just reminding those that don't know, in a lot of places, especially in the South, a political gerrymander is also largely a racial gerrymander, just due to the nature of how that works. But one becomes more important than the other, apparently, for some people. And with that, a thing, an act, a wish, a desire that has been seated with a certain, members of the electorate of our elected leader class of state and local federal governments, immediately, like I said, or state government, federal government was the case, began remapping, which would, could ostensibly cut, I think it was a third of the Congressional Black Caucus out of their seats, I think is the estimation, depending, elections still matter on turnout. So, things could still happen, but it's a significant blow to electoral representation, especially in the areas of the country where the most Black people live, in which, just so we get this out the way now, it is not a practical solution to say that all those Black people should move somewhere else, which is a common refrain in this moment, especially if you read the comments. So saying all that to say, this is a major change. It's something that has been a certain group's intention for decades. Chief Justice Roberts basically dedicated his entire career in law to get to the place where he could be the person to do this, regardless of what he may say about it. If you ask him, I'm sure he wants to be remembered more favorably, but you're not. At least not by this person. So with that though, folks aren't taking this occurrence laying down. Last weekend on the 16th, there was a large national call rally in Alabama to and an ongoing effort to push back against the intent here to sort of disenfranchise the vote again in the place where the most Black folks live, and ensure in these ways try to enshrine in some cases with a minority party's ability to control the government. So, saying that to say, what are some of your first thoughts just about this occurrence and what you're seeing and what you've heard? And generally, I would like to touch on because we had our election night here and a lot of elections around the country that are actually pretty significant. So but we can take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the Voting Rights Act and the stripping of the Voting Rights Act and the brazen attempt, we shouldn't cut any cards here. It's a brazen attempt and, maybe a successful attempt to re-gerrymander and lose seats. It kind of, one, I don't think you can separate it from the current president's activities.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you could separate it from the DNC's autopsy. And I'll explain why. I think there is this idea that, like, if we tinker at the edges, things will be okay. So if you had things as they existed and you tinkered at the edges and made someone a little more digestible on one side or the other, then we'll get America back and it'll be okay. And I think now we should all we should disabuse ourselves of that notion, right? Like, there is an entire different methodology of thinking about voting, of voter turnout, of who's there, why they're there, how they got there, that has to be put into place everywhere in America by those who don't like America being, as far as politically and federally and in many states, the way that it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, in some ways, it's kind of like, give it to me straight, right? Like, don't play around with it, give it to me straight. And, it got straight. This got real straight. Like, we sued for this, we won, and immediately people go to change reality, right? And change the voting. And it also does remind you of the thing that sometimes older folks say, and I guess we're getting older, so now we would say it. If voting wasn't important, they wouldn't try to take it from you. They wouldn't make it difficult. If somebody tries to pass laws, which literally, the Department of Justice and are trying to currently limit when people can vote, how they can vote, and then you see the Voting Rights Act. So you see people, even as things exist, want to limit how you can vote, and then they want to limit who you vote with. So just if we're ever clear, the power of that methodology is so important. It doesn't mean it's its only thing, right? Because I think sometimes we get into this, like, voting plus something, voting versus something. But I think we can clearly say and clearly see those who would like to maintain power are extremely clear that your ability to vote, that Black people's ability to vote as a block, and that is, again, assuming that Black people will vote as a block, right? Yep. That is also implicit, right, and explicit in this conversation. That ability needs to be contained. And I think it's a reality check that, people have to be able to organize to be able to tell other people who do not vote about the role of it without seeming like it's some, like, 1968, SNCC organizing drive with a bad commercial, which sometimes we do. We have very bad commercials when I'm talking about voting. Like, I think we need to really figure out, like, who's doing the influencer work for voting in particular. Like, in the 90s, it was cool when we was growing up. They had, like, smooth jazz on behind it. They'd be like, your ancestors died for your ability to vote. Come on, sold to the polls. right? Like that was cool. Like everybody got that, right?
Yeah.
The other part I will say about this, and I know to go into your point, I don't think all politics are local, but I think the locus of activation, other than some really kind of big tidal wave level shifts like Barack Obama or Donald Trump, the politics of who's engaged and who consistently participates has a local bent to it that then moves up to the federal. And I'll explain why in my example of what happened here in Pennsylvania. But yeah, those are my immediate takes.
Yeah, because I mean, it's I'm an elected person where I live, and I'm also in a member of some organizations and in spaces with electeds and a lot of electeds and that are mostly in the South. And so I get to hear from them, get to get their insights, get their sense of how they're, we can get into almost like an abstract academic experience of an analyzing, what's happening and not think about like, these are very real people in communities, a lot of times legacy, long-term communities that are trying to govern and take care of themselves and do the things that and be responsive to their community and be responsive to the things that are of need while being in a constant meddling from the governmental power that's around them, right? Preemption, doing things like the fight in New Orleans to keep the clerk the court, and you have a state rep, congressman or state rep, I forget whatever the level there, that is actively trying to like eliminate just one seat from the local government that he doesn't even live in. Right. And it just is like the audacity to go to interrupt the will of the voters in a place you don't live because you don't like what that man's circumstance represents. And to have your peers and the other party just go, yeah, I mean, that's what Congressman so and so is on. I'm gonna vote for it because he's my friend. He usually has good ideas, right? Like and like pass it off, like the understand. But that's an insidious behavior, and it's not the first time. It's not an unusual occurrence. It is a part of folks' experience with their local governance. So then, when it gets to be really important to me, is like why folks being involved at the local level, at the state level, becomes significant is like these people can, in many ways disrupt the day-to-day life of where you live. And
are looking to like
and yeah, and they're like, yeah, this is what we want to do. We don't want you to have a comfortable life. We want to have the optimal circumstances for us, and then we want to impose our vision of how things should be organized around, our ability to sort of dictate the structural operations, but also the representation of this region of the country and or wherever we're at, and who gets services and who doesn't get services, and who gets things on time, who doesn't get things on time, what it looks like at the bottom line. That's like what government is actually about. It's not about like some existential debate around the best philosophy for a society. It is a important part of, like, for me responding to this, that like these people are not trying to interrupt theoretical power. They're not trying to win. They're like trying to ensure that whatever's going to happen, that they're going to have the within the confines of the rules, the legal authority to do things, even things that aren't right or are not fair, and then leaving you to have to, if you know leaving you few options outside of civil disobedience of whatever scale to push back against that structural power. So then do things like assign all of the road cleaning crews to one part of the community, so it seems to suddenly have a higher cleaning frequency in your community. Like, I ain't cleaning your roads, but we're gonna get around to it. It's on the chart, right? Like this sort of like this is the thing when people my own feeling. People go, the government, like the specific thing of that like idea is that a body that is supposed to actually represent and do the work of the people being co-opted to do the work of a few, right? Being redirected, being unfairly directed. And the significant thing in communities, in our communities historically, of fighting for political control is also about the decision making about the local resources and state resources, and then as you go up the chain, the federal resources. um I know that we sometimes can have a very robust conversation about the person behind the scenes, and the people that are doing the voting in Congress or in your state house or whatever are not making real decisions. But I know what some of us are trying to say, but those people are making real decisions, and it is significant in this moment that the understanding of like what it means to not have control of any political influence and voice in what goes on around you in the place that you live, in the place that in most situations is not easy for you again to just go, well, I'll just move to another state. I'm just gonna move to California. I'm just gonna move to you name the place that you may say is more favorable. So, which then all becomes a thing of like, so you're just gonna give this to these other people, these terrible people, or you're just gonna not to understand if that's where your family and all your folks are, where you have a job currently, as if there's just a promise of another job somewhere else. um all the things, and also the idea that you need to leave a place that you're rooted in order to be able to see your vision show up in your local and state politics. It's ridiculous, and it's grotesque, and folks have to there's a reason why we actively have fought against these things as a people, as a community, at every turn. So,
Well, I mean, I think there's a conversation around culture and power, and not necessarily in the context of supreme mathematics for this conversation, but the idea of when people think culture matters so much that power doesn't matter, right? Because when you think about culture and who moves, and even people talk about it in the culture, right? Like, this is the culture. This is, we are for the culture. We're pushing the culture forward. It's never quite clear who the culture is. But then you see a situation where people are very explicitly talking about power. And they're not talking about culture. They're talking about power. And they're using power to define the reality of resources and decision making. At this point, for me, I think about the Heritage Foundation. In the, I don't know, 25, 30-year process of getting control of the Supreme Court, right? And you had people who were almost like not focused on anything else in the world but getting the Supreme Court.
mm-hmm.
No matter who it was, no matter what's going on, no matter the president, all we care about is the Supreme Court. And many of us look at that and say, oh, that's a one topic issue. And then you look and say, oh, that's not actually a one topic issue, because the Supreme Court voting on things actually determines damn near everything else that happens if it gets to the highest court in the land, right? Because people were focused on power. And sometimes and I'm saying this in a broad sense, a democratic sense, the culture, wherever that's at, like, sometimes it's just about holding things back, mitigating risk. And I think that this is a time where you start to realize that there's a difference between mitigating risk and informing power and informing influence and creating the laws to reflect the world you want to see. not just the conditions on the ground that are separate from the laws. So if somebody can be an influencer, or if somebody can get a record, not just a record deal, but just if somebody can do the stuff they want to do, again, having no idea where the money comes from in many situations, especially if it's kind of things flowing through the state and local government, right? They're okay with that and not worried about this idea of it being abstract, especially for Congress people. But to your point, then when you start to see other things, gerrymander is not just your congressperson, it's now your state senator or your state representative, right?
Mm-hmm.
And especially in the South, where it's such a hard break between D's and R's, moving someone into any space can change the voting record and change who is there from someone who worked for someone who was gerrymandered, right? And they just took his house and put it in a 70% Republican space. And just like that, it was over, right? Like we all did dinners because that just was what happened. And it was gerrymandering. So someone who existed through it, but someone had to have the power to do it. Right. And I think this is I'd like to say it's a wake-up call, but I don't quite know if it's a wake-up call. I don't know if it's a wake-up call or if it's the alarm you put on that might wake you up. It might not. It is, to be honest. I don't know if it's a wake-up call. Like, I don't know if, like, now, other than, everyone talking really tough on the internet about what they're going to do and how far this pushes back. Like, what's the methodology of creating long-term power for things you care about? And that takes a ruthlessness of sorts. And I know that a lot of folks who will listen to this podcast and our family to people in the podcast don't like the term ruthlessness, right? Because in some ways it does not connect with the ways that we want to live and see the world. But you are at a form of combat. When you're in a form of combat, you have to think about what are the rules of engagement. And then sometimes, how do you move the rules of engagement? Because the rules of engagement may best act against you. And what does that look like? And how do you activate people? And here's the other part of this that I think is important. It can be very easy right now for the CBC to be up in arms. And I got my own take on the CBC, although I attend every year. I have my own take on the role of the CBC in the Democratic Party, frankly. But this is not a black issue. This is a voting issue. This is a democracy issue. So I think one of the challenges can be to make it a black issue. And it's not. It just happens to be black people who are most impacted given that situation. But it's not a black issue. It's a democracy issue. Who has access to democracy, especially given the history of American society?
Yeah.
And I think you have to broaden it, because I think if you just make it a black situation, some people will keep their seats. Let's be honest. Some people will keep their seats. Some people won't. And the people that don't keep their seats, that, but they'll get a job.
Yeah. They make a move,
Go get a job, and they'll be okay, and they'll be mad about the voting. But to your point, the people who are living every day, and then they had a black congressman or a Latino congressman and now don't have a Latino congressman or don't have a black congressman, or they may have had a white congressperson who was open to support the interests of that community.
Right.
But and now fine hiking somebody else.
Right. They may have found themselves with somebody who openly is like, I don't want to care about them people, and I can get enough votes to be the person, and they can't do anything about it, or at least, unless they do a monumental turnout. Or, someone who may feel they don't have to be as responsive now because you're not as much of a threat to their ability to be reelected. And I think it's important because the tie-in with the conversation of the Heritage Foundation and getting control of the Supreme Court. The other part of making the power of the Supreme Court to decide to use, judgment in the way they choose to use it, because, everyone should remember that they once thought it was totally logical to just say that a black person had no rights and a white person need respect. In Plessy versus Ferguson, and the reality facts of humanity didn't change. It's just the temperament and the like. Actually, you know what? That's kind of buck wild and crazy to say that in a country that says it frames itself on being the land of freedom and democratic existence. But the complementing reality is the Supreme Court power is heightened in the absence of a Congress that actually makes decisions, right? And almost our entire life of a Congress that basically almost makes as few decisions as possible, right? That spends more time arguing, does these super gigantic omnibus bills a couple of times a year, and or the only things that move through fast are either ridiculous resolutions about stuff, non-binding resolutions that we wanted to stay a statement. Not always ridiculous. Some of them are not ridiculous, but the inactivity of Congress it strengthens the reality, because all of these things can be changed if Congress passes laws, right? Like and then even the Supreme Court will say, oh yeah, actually Congress they explicitly said what we need to do. Even they do love to play the like, well, did Congress mean this or did they mean that? I don't know. Maybe it could have meant something else. It's like, no, they wrote it right in there. They meant to do exactly what it meant. You know what I mean? And then again so it's a shared strategy of you have a the party that was when they get control of both houses that is like, yeah, we're barely going to pass any new legislation. We're going to do reconciliation bills. We're going to do a couple things in there, but we're just going to hold everything up, or then we're going to spend hours having debates about stuff that is ultimately not going to pass, but again, it uses time. So for those of us who in this moment are sort of in the minority as it pertains to power, you have to think about the goal of being in politics is to have the power to make decisions. And so what's not just the strategy, it's not just the getting people that hold your values elected, it's also having those people know how to get things done in the space, right? It's also having a vision, like here's the ways we can get this issue or this area of influence moving. Here's the ways that we want to use power, right? And not be scared of that, not be like, well, the hierarchy, having some sort of philosophical debate about it. Like, no, we want to have people be at the seats in these spaces so they can make the decisions with the apparatus, right? And that you've thought about it, right? You've been thoughtful about what should it do, how should it behave, what are the responsibilities here. I think anyone that's running for local office, running for a state rep, state senator, should think about, like, can I get things done if I'm the person in seat, and how do things get done where I'm at? Do I know? If I don't know, how do I find out? Right. The importance in many places of, I look at even our elections this week, and some of these were primaries. So we have our primaries, and then we have our main race in the fall, except for some nonpartisan seats. They don't get 50+1, then it's a runoff in the fall. And, there's some of our state reps in terms of votes. It's like 7,000, 8,000 votes, 6,000 votes to be elected, which is, in the grand scheme of things, not that many people.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you got to think about, like, for folks, sometimes you think, well, like, we have races, a very close race. And I mean, it's spread out, but at one point, for a couple state rep positions where that's a couple hundred votes between two candidates. Right. So it does matter to be involved, and the closeness of those things at a local level is like, yeah, your vote and your participation can matter. Now, again, it mattering doesn't mean that it's a cure-all for everything that you want to see changed.
Right.
But it is still significant. And then again, there's a reason these people are trying definitely to have full control of the local apparatus, so they can make decisions like removing all of the Democrats, and I guess it turned out in Tennessee mostly, and then I'll double check some that seem to be all of the black Democrats from their committee seats, right, due to their, the demonstrations and the protests, and also just because it's like, well, we could do it, and they may not really have no legal recourse to stop us, right? But
Right.
these are choices to do with our democracy and with the structure of democracy, where you got to ask yourself, as if you're any person that's listening, and I appreciate that you said about the VRA, that it isn't, and that's been my thing, and even I've been noodling on since it started, is how do we, in other parts of the country where people may think this doesn't apply to them, it's like, no, these people are creating ways to play around with elections and play games with the truth, where that's an effective strategy there. Their intention is to try to find another effective strategy that will work where you're at, if they can pull it off, right? Like it's the same playbook. This symposium I was at a few weeks ago, one of the key things they talked about was that for decades, especially the Republican Party, in this case, the conservative politics, tries this stuff, tests these things in the South, and then they immediately start exporting it around the country, right? So the right to work
Absolutely.
drawn passed in Louisiana, and within a year, they passed the same thing in Michigan. Michigan, the home of the auto workers, one of the strongest unions historically in the United States. And Michigan is a state that has basically, you can't make someone join the union to work a place. That was a major change, and a part of why some parts of unions writ large are not as strong as they were at other times in terms of structural politics,
And
in
I
other
should
workplace
note,
things.
I think we have to have the conversation at some point that yes, we all thought that unions also, we said unions broadly were voting the politics of,
Mm-hmm.
progressives or at least economic progressives. We've then seen that at some point, certain unions will vote the politics of not even their money. They will
Mm-hmm.
vote the politics of the culture.
Yeah.
Right. And the shift that comes with that, and then the political shift that I think, again, the Democratic Party had like a model. Like you take black folks, you take brown folks, you take union folks, you take liberal white folks, you put it together and you put this umbrella and you get somebody that can deal with all of them and you figure it out and you win. Or you don't win.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wherever you run people now, it's going to be a different conversation.
Yeah.
And that's why I connected it to the autopsy, the 2024 autopsy. Like, and people can look and take from that autopsy what they will about the person that ran, the way they ran, and all of the things. But the idea that you're going to just be able to play at the edges and just, hey, you know what? Let's run this back with someone that goes to Detroit and hangs out at the child care center, then goes to Saginaw and does this, and then goes to a picnic with the blueberry farmers and says that you care about them. Like, just that model doesn't reflect the reality of the changing cultural conditions of America.
Yeah.
And so, what is the new broader strategy for thinking about a defensible and defendable majority? And, I will always say this, as much as we talk about the voter that's voting and changing the voter that's voting, there's a whole bunch of people who ain't voting. And part of the thing is that's the other part of the thing of like changing the votes in states, right? Because you can't change it nationally. You change it in states about what time people can vote, when they can do it, what time they can be in line, can they send stuff in? Because the numbers are always there. America is a center right country because of who votes, not
Yeah.
necessarily because of everyone's perspective on the
That's good.
world.
Yeah.
It's a center right. It's a center right country because of the vote. And so, always, how do we keep in mind, I think about like our children, like where do you come into this space of voting? And especially when there's so much information and there's so many lies and so much AI slop, right? Like, how do you get people who in most situations would be inclined to support progressive ideas to actually go the way to support the idea when people are producing information and slop literally to stop them from voting? We could look no further than all of the black pill stuff. And we've talked about this before.
Mm-hmm.
But all of the black pill people who said, Vice President Harris, because I don't start calling people by their first names, and sometimes we use that to delegitimize people, right? We use calling by the first name to delegitimize them versus their title. Vice President Harris, about her being black enough and her personal relationships, as if that was a disqualifying thing, right? And as soon as that happened, you can't find none of this stuff no more. You go to half of them sites, you can't find the people talking about her or anything else anymore, because literally, like, you got docs, like you got played with.
Yeah.
Right. And you got played with. So at the end of the day, the current sitting president and the DOJ have created a $1.8 billion fund for people who feel like they've been wronged by the government. So your vote being anti-Vice President Harris went for crypto and $1.8 billion slush fund, which even Republicans are calling the slush fund. So just so it's not like I'm sitting here and I'm like the culture warrior.
I mean, that is, this whole thing is like, if and I guess for those, because I do listen to a podcast with people that are real lawyers and talk about the details of some of this. Like, basically, because it was coming to where the judge was going to be like, yo, you two people can't sue this place.
You can't sell deal.
Like, you basically voted with yourself. Yeah, this is out. I'm about to throw this out. So then to act like we created a settlement, which is not really a settlement. It's actually not a settlement. It's like it's a demarcation of resources to take settlements of other cases. Ultimately, I think they'll find the legal strategy to be like, yeah, come on, dog. And I think this may actually be the where, I mean, I've said it when we recorded early on about, last year this time, or whenever the inauguration happens. Like, yeah, these people are gonna try to steal everything that's not bolted to the floor. As far as they're gonna tell it, hey, what, you like this? You like this vase? Hey man, it's you, baby. Take that. No, you got it. Go ahead and take it for the office. We got 1,000 vases. We got mad vases back there. You know what I'm saying? You go ahead and take that one.
No one had ever seen something like this. We talk about this, and you only see it on a local level.
Yeah, no, like local, at the federal level.
At the federal level, people that function like this.
Yeah.
It's another level of mercantilism. It's another level of like, I'm going to blow you up. I'm not going to blow you up. My bad. I'm being disrespectful. Maybe
actually,
I should chill.
Looks like we're moving forward. Looks like we're making inroads.
Because someone's calling being like, yo, you messing up the money, dog. And then like, I am messing up the money.
I went too far. I went too far on that one.
I went too far on that one.
I was just saying,
I predict we will come to a time where this war will be talked about, and once the covers are lifted off of how this happened,
it's gonna be, they better all be out the country or somewhere you can. Yeah.
Of like all time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be
of like how we got here and what the solution actually is.
Ooh.
I read an article the other day that talked about how reportedly, because I don't know, I'm gonna try to get us in trouble. There was a blast that tried to free previous president of Iran, Iranian president Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, to get free. You didn't take over,
right? Like that. Like, and I was thinking, like, I mean, is it just him being in the house? Is that the only thing stopping him from being the president of Iran? Like, is that the logic? That can't be the logic. There's got to be some other steps, right? There's got like, he's out of the house, y'all, and then like the people were gonna be like, he's the leader. Like, that is a ridiculous idea.
It's ridiculous.
I don't need to know anything to know that's crazy.
And even to think that you know so little about a set of people, to not respect the politics of, yes, he was the president, but guess what? He's not now. And there's some stuff going on that will probably likely he would never be president again.
Yeah,
he's on house arrest.
Yeah.
It wasn't that the people of Iran were up in arms for that.
Yeah. They were clamoring for him to come back.
Ahmadinejad to be free. Like, but that's the point. Like, this is what we're doing. So if someone is making decisions based on the stock market, we have an idea of what's occurring, but at the same time, there are people who are looking at this as the best chance ever to create a permanent majority via the law, not via the people, to your point, Jess, via the law. Because the law will create the permanent majority in absence of the people's perspective actually being that. And again, it goes, and this is where I actually don't try to be this political prognosticator around like what the problem is, because I actually think the problem is a jackrabbit that you're chasing. Like, I think sometimes we'd be like, there's a problem. No, the problem is moving. And I use for that, to your point about some of the things, looking at the Pennsylvania 3rd Congressional District, which is the most Democratic district in America. That covers most of covers the West Philadelphia, North Philadelphia, most of South Philadelphia, up into Northwest Philadelphia, but it's all Philadelphia, Philadelphia seat. And there were 3 people running. One was Sharif Street, someone that I know and consider someone who I've been friendly with. So I want to start there. I don't want to start talking and act like, I'm burying the lead here. Son of a mayor, state senator in his own right, has been involved in politics for a long time. Ala Stanford, the doctor who was nationally known for the work she did in Philadelphia around COVID, around getting people services in COVID, and then, decided to run. And then Chris Rabb, a state representative from Northwest Philly, who, would be seen on the more like quote unquote progressive spectrum, aligned with AOC. I don't know if there's a squad anymore. If you notice, that's an interesting thing that hasn't been talked about recently. Kind of AOC doing her own thing, and then everybody's figuring it out. It's kind of like, Rockefeller. It's like they were together for a minute, and everybody went to their own solo.
It was like
state property.
It's kind of stop talking about it. Like, they didn't like say it broke up, and then they just sort of, like, oh, Kanye's going that way, and they probably go here.
It's the same. It's the same way. The only person that broke up was Dame Dash. But like, anyway, so, and in this race, in this most bluest race that you can possibly get, the Senator Street was supported. State Senator Street was supported by the Philadelphia city, the Democratic Party. Ala Stanford was supported by the current sitting congressperson and 2 other congresspeople. And then Chris Rabb is supported by a lot of folks. And Chris Rabb won the election, right? So I'm not trying to get too. Chris Rabb won by a lot in a place that it doesn't make any sense to you why Chris Rabb wins this election. The same way it doesn't make any sense to you why Zoran Mandami wins the mayor of New York, unless it actually does. And when you take a look at the politics and the changing politics of cities, it does make sense why Zoran Mandami won, and it does make sense why Chris Rabb won. So even in the Democratic Party, there's this conversation of everyone thinking like there's this window. And my point is just, there's not a window. There's a who is grabbing the attention of people based on the conditions of the time. 6 years ago, there was no way Chris Rabb would have won that, won that election. No way. Definitely not 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that it was as true Black Philadelphia Democratic Committee as you get. The Democratic Committee had nothing to do with this, right? So I'm saying that in a bigger sense of when we think about this power dynamic, and I think there is some space in the Democratic Party where people are thinking broader than the status quo. But like I said, that change or that next thing is a jackrabbit. That thing is constantly moving, and you have to be constantly moving. You can't be having the same conversations and think you're grabbing the new voter. Because guess what? The new voter has none of the attachments that you have. Right? I am a 49-year-old black man. I'm pulling up the real. You and Niles Bill. Pull the real, y'all, at 50. Power in the cyber, right? But like, I'll say, oh man, you know what? At least this person can get the work done. Azania does not say that. My 29-year-old daughter, she does not start with you can get the work done. If it doesn't connect with her politics, she will not support you. She just won't vote. And I think as part of this process, we have to think through this because there is an attack on the idea of voting. And then there's the kind of just disconnection that voters have to the process. And I think it is the job of, not just the everyday elected, just I'm sure you knock your doors and you smile at people and you tell them, and they be like, yeah, right on, just right. And they're inspired. So it's not just the actual elected. I do think it's these infrastructures we've created and get millions of dollars, damn near $1 billion to do stuff. Because just like we attack the nonprofits when like stuff goes haywire, we say, well, we gave money to these people, the DNC, and all these different, all these different organizations actually deserve the same level of scrutiny when it comes to engaging not just the voter who already voted, but thinking about the voter who has not voted and connecting democracy in the actual fundamental element of America that makes it unique and that democracy to their activity.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I think is at least translating through to me, and even a couple races we had here, and I will not frame the elections on this mic, this hot mic right here, the way some other outlets have framed elections. But I will say we have some folks that have been elected in local politics here who people would be like, wait, how did they won? Like, remember the old Eddie, we're not going to do the whole Eddie Murphy joke, but the joke he did about Jesse running for office, but they'd be like, with the bed, like, oh man, he running for office. And they'd be like, wait, he won? Like, wait a minute. Right? Like that type of energy. And these are good people. These are not like bad people, but I think we are in a change in the American electorate. I mean, one part of it exemplified by our generation are now like the mean voter, the people who are probably going to vote the most are our generation for the next 20 years. I'm gonna tell all your young people, I love y'all. Y'all be red hot. Some of y'all don't vote, so y'all be red hot on the mic and got a lot to say. And then you ain't always turning up at the polls in certain types of elections. Now, y'all might have got out there for in some space. I'm just letting you know,
right?
As a person who had to look at the numbers of my own elected votes, a lot of people over 55 that actually went and sent those in our state mailed or dropped their ballots off. Not that I didn't appreciate the younger people. I'm just telling you, get in the game, folks. But I think that we are a society. I think we are simultaneously, we are like looking for leaders. We're looking for people to step up, people to have a sense and a message and a perspective. But we're also looking for them, I think people are looking for them to be genuine about what they're doing right now. And not just in a like, litmus test kind of way, but in a like, nah, I ain't feeling, they feel like they just want to do the same thing the other person want to do. Like people are not comfortable with the person who appears to be like, I'm trying to, and hope this will land, cater to like the idea of, well, you can just got to get the moderate voter and like do this stuff and don't say anything too risky and whatever. I think people are looking for folks to like step up, stand out, have ideas about governance, about society. I mean, I'm a big advocate too, though, that we also just start talking about some of this stuff. Hey man, like it's supposed to govern it so like it gets things done, so like the lights turn on and the water runs and we know where the equipment is and we can keep track of the money and you don't have to worry about why
No,
that someone's gonna try to put a steel stamping house next to a daycare center because they'd be like, that would be kind of crazy. There's kids in there, man. You can't have lead dust flying in with the babies, like whatever the case may be. Like, I think people are looking for folks that really want to serve, but also I think there's a lot of space for voter education. I think there's a lot of space for engagement with people. I think there's a lot of space for not counting on sort of the idea that there's an establishment and I can go scrape those establishment off the thing and then I'll be able to keep my seat or I'll be able to run and I think people are looking for a vision. Like I think people, and not necessarily like a woo woo vision, just like, yo, do you have a plan? Like, sell me on the plan, fam. Like, tell me the thing you gonna do and how you gonna do it, and I might be like, all right, let's go for it.
no, I think you're absolutely correct, and I think that balance is really important because sometimes, and then some of my friends will listen and be like, "Oh man, you shouldn't have said that." Sometimes the people who will vote for someone don't feel the actual physical effects of when something goes haywire. So here's what I mean. You will have some races that like I'm going to use the third congressional district in Philly. We all hope and intentional because my father lives in the district, my daughter lives in the district, right? Like I want him to go and if it's relevant, give him hell. I also want to make sure there are programs that for workforce. I also want to make sure that there's a basketball court that gets redone. I want to make sure that there's a healthcare model that talks to doulas about making sure birth can take place, like in people's communities.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I do want both of those. If you want to give them hell, dog. But I also want you to make sure that the people who are most sensitive to the resources be able to continue to get them. And guess what? If you can't do it via that, you need to figure out where other resources are. Because guess what? I can understand in some situations the money just ain't coming down. In my day job, I've seen the change, and I'll just leave it there. Mm-hmm. Right. However, the people who have the biggest needs still need the person to go and figure out how to cut the deal. And I know sometimes that sounds bad to people. But one thing about the Congressional Black Caucus and the heroes and sheroes that we all look at, they figured out how to do both. They figured out literally how to like represent us. And here's the other thing, just as one thing you were saying. In many ways, those elected officials were the voter education, or the machines on the local level were the voter education.
Oh yeah.
Because they were the people touching people, saying, "Hey," and not the knock and yank to the poll for folks who are listening. Knock and yank is what happens on election day, where people knock on your door. They say, "Hey, did you vote yet?" And they say no, and they yank you and put you in, give you a sandwich, and get you to the poll, right? And don't get me wrong, sometimes knocking and yanking is the difference between, to your point just earlier, like the winner and a winner or loss. Yeah. However, if they're not ready before that day, what we're doing is making the best of a bad situation. We have to think deeper about this and again be able to skillfully balance that out. And I do, and again, listen. For those you can't see me, but I got a Harold Washington shirt on. And you think about people, electeds from time immemorial who did amazing things, and not exclusively Black, just for this conversation, right? Just who were connected to the people. We talk about Wellstone a lot, right? Uh-huh. Earlier talked about a state senator I worked for, State Senator Jim Furlow. So it's not it isn't actually not a race thing. It's a people thing. It's a humanity thing.
Absolutely.
But people who are human have to be willing to fight for the power to keep us human.
Yes.
You can't give up the fight to keep us human. And that means the fight of the means of the structure of the government. So this is, Justin says when I say it, so people should see what the elected that's talking. Next thing is doing. And y'all figure it out on your own time, not on this time. This is something else. However, and I say that in all seriousness, even though, it's playful banter, but I say it in all seriousness because that is actually the key. People who are trying to figure out how to make a movement of a mess. You hear people that turn a message into a movement, a message into a moment. Well, guess what? You gotta go the other way.
Yeah.
You gotta actually make a movement out of a goddamn mess.
Yeah. I mean,
and I do think it's very, very, very important that we think about this. And this is one last piece I'll say about this. I think we've all been harmed by the fact that young people don't learn civics. And I'm not saying where they have to learn civics. I'm not getting into what class, what school. You won't catch me there. Young people have to learn civics, whether they learn it in their communities, whether they learn it in third grade, in the seventh grade, and in ninth grade. There's a lot around America 250 right now, right? And if you notice, there's like all parties.
It's all like just having celebrations.
Ain't been
a discussion about the concept of the Constitution or why it's 250 years. What vote? It ain't been a. I haven't seen anything, to be quite honest, besides people saying that they're going to have a hell of a fling 4th of July. That's all I've heard.
Listen. 1776, we are 76 babies. And then if you think about 1787, which is actually the whole thing in Philadelphia, right? Like, yeah. And like we went through a deep thing in 1987, man.
Yeah, I remember.
You remember there was no stone left unturned about government in 1987.
And right now, as far as anybody, if you ask most people, like, yeah, they're gonna have like double fireworks. Like usually they have fireworks, it's gonna be like double fireworks.
You know it is like the Boondocks.
Yeah.
We are in a boondock situation about democracy. We're having a party.
Yeah. I mean, it is incumbent, I think, upon people to go like, hey man, do you know how this works? Like, because we have a lot of conjecture about how it works, but it's like actually there's actual rules. So they're like, well, how can they do that? And then my favorite thing is also like because you don't know how it works. When someone is in the seat, they're like, actually, I can't do this. They're like, well, they seem to be doing it like they just said they did it, but they didn't actually do it. They lied. They lied on TV, and then you thought they did it and stopped asking about a thing that was important. They actually didn't do it, but their goal was not to do it. Their goal was to have us stop talking about it so that it would move off the radar and whatever else would happen would happen. I think we're getting close to time. The thing I want to, I think there's a lot to do in this moment. I think maybe the Justice Civics Project. I'm just get over here and tell people something about the government. Like, did you ever read the Constitution? You ever read it? I don't really want to hear what you got to say about nothing else about it.
They made us read that in the Bill of Rights, Jack. Yeah. I'm telling you.
We had everybody. They gave us constitutions. And they actually, you can get a constitution for free at the Smithsonian. Like, you can just go get one. Like, it's free. They just give them away. Like printed ones. But the thing I think that's, and I'm gonna put a link in the notes. There's an effort out to basically tell people, like, especially in a lot of these states that are going to be heavily gerrymandered, but is to get control of the state houses. And the pathway to do that is to fund small local electeds that are running for state office. Because most places, they are heavily underfunded. They don't have resources. And the funding means that they can have people go knocking on doors and motivating people, doing voter education, doing community connection, doing events to get people excited and engaged in their electorate. But that all takes money. And it doesn't take as much money, though. It's, doesn't take as much money. It doesn't take, I want to say the number I've heard, it could take less in many places to do hundreds of races, local races, than it would to do one congressional race, like a national race would cost. So like, yo, there's a thing I'm gonna find. I think it's called Oath Vote or something like that. I'm gonna go look into it. And this is my private podcast. I can say what I want. You know what I'm saying? In case anybody out there got some kind of feelings. You know what I'm saying? I'm representing justice right now. The person, the human. You know what I mean? Yeah, like find somebody local about them and like, man, put a 5, 10, put a 50, put 100 on it, and put some money so they can go out and campaign to get their community energized and engaged. And I think to me that is the one thing I would go from like if this was 1987 we was gonna make a commercial, that would be the commercial I'd make. But otherwise it's like, yeah, man, it's a startling moment because people totally are just like, oh yeah, 250 years. You think they're gonna have pizza? You think they're gonna have pizza there? Like
it's gonna be big concerts. Is the World Cup, which is deserving of its own podcast.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that at some point.
The big the big money grab. We talk about the big money grab. FIFA might be damn near as bad as Donald Trump, and I'm a soccer fan. This is out of control. Yeah, it's people talking about how you gonna get there. You know, New Jersey Transit. They're talking about how you get from like, you know, the tickets was like $150, all crazy to get to the Meadowlands.
Oh yeah. That's all the thing. Like you had to buy some kind of special pass. I was so crazy. I kind of stopped paying attention because I was like, this seems confusing, and I ain't going anyway.
So Dom need to figure it out. He didn't negotiate it with FIFA for tickets, and then Governor Cheryl, she mad now because, you know, shit's going on, man. It's a lot. You know, this is why one of the things where say what you will about the NFL. Like the NFL, their skullduggery is done on a local level.
Yeah. They're not doing international.
They play ball. They figure it out. FIFA is a whole nother thing. They come and be like, it's going to be great. Everyone's going to come. And then people are like, no, everyone's not going to come.
Everybody's coming.
It's America.
Yeah.
And they don't know the country. And guess what? We're in a weird xenophobic time, if we're being honest. We're in a weird xenophobic time in America. So depending on who's playing in your place, they're not coming.
Yeah. I mean, it's May. This is supposed to happen in like 2 months. And I ain't seen. I don't even know what matches are in. I think Seattle is a site.
Yeah, Seattle has it. Yeah,
it's the closest one to us. And we, you know, originally had talked about trying to go somewhere to see some of the matches, but I'm, you know, I mean, among other things, of them, and then I'm good. Like I just watch it on TV.
Hotels are blocked off, so therefore you're like, I don't know if I want to go to this place. And then even like the ones in Philadelphia, you know, right on. But you know, it's like it's a lot, man. You know, so anyway, but you know, the point of all this is support your local electeds, especially ones who've read the Constitution and read the Bill of Rights like this. But you got some other people who've read the Bill of Rights and Constitution, support them too. And really, you know, make sure that as much as we benefit from the place of democracy with all of its ugliness, that we are now constantly pouring into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so with that, I mean, we'll be back to this because there's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about politics, but it's you know, for the sake of this recording, I think this is a good place to wrap it up. So with that, I say peace. Thank you for listening to Good Brothers. Thank you to my good brother, I'm Majestic. Good Brothers is a part of the Ask Your Oldhead podcast feed where you are listening and you can rate, subscribe, share to support the podcast. You can also search Justice Rajee on Patreon and become a patron. And you can also go to askyouroldhead.com and go to the shop, buy a t-shirt. You know what I'm saying? Comments are truly a psyop. And, you know, yeah, lots of things going on. So, you know, take the best part for yourself. Thank you for listening. Peace.